Let's begin.
Hey there, scary story fanatics. Welcome back to Cleaving Thought from Bone with your host, Sociopathic. Ever wanted to know more about someone? Dive deep into their past experiences? Well, be careful what you discover, as is in the case with tonight's little tale. Settle yourselves in by your monitor screens, or for a remembrance that you can't soon forget. Something about me.
We have all had strange things happen to us as children. Things we thought were real, maybe even terrifying, and later discovered they're rational causes or have forgotten all about them altogether. When I was a child, I was diagnosed with chronic night terrors. I'm not sure if it was the bedwetting, the late-night panicked screaming, or the challenges I gave my parents about bedtime, but they eventually took me to a doctor for assistance. It didn't take long for them to give a deliberation of my adjustment to relatively normal developmental changes, providing a script for a mild sedative, and assured them that it was only a phase. If only he had been correct. He delivered hope, and my parents believed as such. They told me, "See, the doctor said you're going to be fine." I think that they were actually trying to reassure themselves more than me. Maybe for them it had worked, but it didn't help me at all. I really hated sleep. When I was 5 years old, I would have this obscure, reoccurring dream about something crawling its way through my bedroom window. In my dream, I'd still be in bed, hiding under the covers, trying my best to wake up. No matter how hard I would try, I never would. The thing would crawl about my floor, ever so softly, but loud enough to alert me to its ominous presence. It would always eventually end with my parents rushing into the room and to my side, having finally heard my screams. For a while, I tried to tell them that it wasn't a dream, that it all seemed so real, but my father would check the window and its lock to find it still closed, and the lock still in the engaged position. This happened time and time again, to the point where I would truly dread entering my room at night for bedtime. No matter what tricks my parents tried to teach me, no matter what I would focus on while drifting off into slumber, the end result was always the same: unrelenting terror. I took the medication my parents had given me with a bit of fuss. I didn't like taking pills. They always felt like they got stuck in my throat. I couldn't chew them up because they would taste so gross. Still, I knew it was in my best interests to do what my mother told me, lest my father get involved, and took the pill in my mouth and followed it with a large sip of water from a flower-embroidered drinking glass. I remember those glasses well, as my mother always bought the same style dishware from the same store. I had eaten my dinner, put on my favorite Spider-Man pajamas, and watched 2 hours of television. It was time for bed. My mother walked with me into the bedroom and tucked me in with the blankets so I would be nice and snug. Something I really didn't like, by the way, as it made me feel too constrained. when she had given me her final gesture, a loving kiss on the forehead, she told me good night, before leaving the room and the door partly open, facilitating a large illuminated crack. A few moments later, I could hear the large feet of my father approaching from down the hall. My mother had told him that I was all tucked in and that he should come and say goodnight to me as well. It's something that he did just about every night, and he never seemed to mind. In fact, he seemed to enjoy it, like he was proud. My father explained to me that I should have a good night's rest this night, and that he and Mom would be right down the hall, so I had no reason to worry. I forced a smirk and nodded only a little. My dad gave me a smile right back, told me that he loved me as well, before telling me to get some sleep and exiting through the doorway, leaving the door the same as when my mother had left. That first night, they really had me convinced. I had actually begun to believe that it was only a persistent nightmare and that maybe the new medication would somehow help. Deep down, though, I knew what I was in for. I knew it because that feeling of dread never left me as I told myself over and over again that I would be fine, that it was just a silly dream, and fell fast asleep. I don't know how long I laid there. It couldn't have been too long. It seemed that within moments, my room had gone from its dimly lit ambience to that of pitch black. The house had grown quiet, and the hallway dark. I must have fallen asleep for a moderate portion of time, because my parents had long since retired to their own respective room for the evening and were fast asleep. It was at that moment that a sinking feeling washed over me, and my thoughts began to wander. What if time hadn't passed at all? What if I slipped into unconsciousness and had entered the realm of my nightly terrors? I figured it was the latter, because I had allowed myself to think about it when my window began to slowly slide upward to an open position. I shut my eyelids tight, hoping that if I couldn't see it, that maybe it would just go away. If I didn't see it, maybe I could convince myself that it wasn't there. Maybe I could even wake myself. I heard a loud thump on the floor near the window at the foot of my bed. A cool breeze washed over top of my blankets and seeped below my covers. I knew the window was indeed open. Something was in my room. Whatever it was, it had a particularly odd smell about it. Something like rotten meat, chemicals, and wet earth, all combined into one noxious, foul odor. It was faint, but distinct and identifiable. In the nearly deafening silence, I could hear something other than my now pounding heart. It was a practically inaudible breathing, only made noticeable by the faint wheeze that accompanied each exhale. Whatever it wasn't moving. I could hear the sounds of breathing emanating from a single fear-inducing location at the foot of my bed. I couldn't help myself. Maybe it was plain curiosity. Maybe I was still in the embrace of attempting to convince myself that this really wasn't happening. But whatever it was, it obviously knew I was there, and that I wasn't going anywhere. So, I looked. It only lasted a fraction of a second, but in that time, I could have cared less about whether it was real or not. Terror consumed me. I shut my eyes tight yet again and shouted for my parents. I started to cry, certain of imminent doom. A loud bang, a creak, and the light flicked on I found myself still far too paralyzed by fear to attempt opening my eyes again. Even at that moment, I assumed that my parents had heard my wailing and rushed to my side, but I wasn't taking any chances. I continued my yelling and bawling until I felt my mother's grip on my shoulders through the blankets and the reassuring voice of my father signaling his proximal presence. I opened my wet eyes, sure that something had just been here and was still likely in my room. My mother started asking me questions about what I had been dreaming of, and my father was voicing his own concerns as well. But myself? I couldn't help from keeping my young eyes from first wandering over to focus upon my window pane, framed within my wall at the bottom of my bed. My father instantly halted his current sentence and asked me if something was troubling me regarding the window, underscoring the dark of night beyond the glass. My eyes went to his and then back to the window. I never had to say a word to him. He already knew and proceeded to the window, reached out to the lock and gave it a push in the correct direction so as to confirm that the lock was indeed engaged. Signified by the couple of jostling pushes he gave, he confirmed that the window was indeed locked and that nothing could have gotten through it. My mother asked if I was thirsty for some reason. She was always like that when I had a nightmare, and went to go get me a small drink of water. I took the drink upon her return and listened to both my parents do their best to comfort me and try to convince me to go back to sleep. With a kiss and a tuck, they left me alone in my room once more. This time they had left the hall light on, trying to facilitate a sense of safety in regards to myself. It didn't matter. I didn't fall asleep that night until I saw the sky outside the window turn from a deep purplish black to that of a dark smoke gray. I knew what I had seen, and to this day, I still hate clowns. I must have fallen asleep again sometime in the early morning, however, because I was once again awakened by my mother, who was telling me that it was time to get up. The dull sky had yet again changed its hue to a light bluish tone, highlighted by golden rays of sunshine protruding forth from the glass in the window like wide, translucent laser beams. I could hear my mom calling me for breakfast. Her call must have been what had awoken me. I attended an afternoon kindergarten class, so I wasn't due to be dropped off at the school until closer to noon. When I had arrived at the school, I was instantly greeted by two of my friends from class as soon as I entered the colorful, child-oriented classroom. The group of us always played together. There were 4 of us, actually, and with our combined elementary strength, we practically ruled the playground at recess. That day, however, there were only 3 of us, and I assumed Philip was probably just faking illness so that he could skip school. I was reluctant to tell the others about what was going on at night when they asked me at lunch, but I'll admit, it felt good to talk about it with someone other than doctors or my parents. Johnny's expression hung thick with intrigue as I divulged my situation. Bill's expression grew full with more and more dread as I continued. When I had finished, Bill spoke up like he had been waiting to release a torrent, like a tidal wave that had been held back by a concrete dam. Billy informed me that Philip had told him over the previous weekend, while on a playdate at his house, that he'd been suffering from a nearly identical reoccurring nightmare to mine. This is when I began to truly nurture the possibility and plausibility of it all. I can't remember what happened for the rest of that school day. My mind was strictly focused upon what Bill had told me. John just laughed it off, and I pretended to do the same. But deep down, I couldn't. My father picked me up after class that day, which I found very unusual, as he was usually still at work when the afternoon bus would drop me off at home. He told me that he and Mom wanted to ask me something, to talk about something when we arrived home. Besides that, he really didn't say much. I'm sure that his mind was quite preoccupied. I really didn't mind. I didn't feel like talking much either. That didn't matter, though, once we got home. I was instantly bombarded with questions by my mother, who was now being accompanied by my father. All kinds of weird questions like, where did my friends and I go when we played outside? If I had any hobbies that they didn't know about, and what exactly had I been dreaming about? I told them everything. The only new information I related to them was a description of what I believed to be crawling through my bedroom window late at night. It was a clown, but not like a happy kind of clown. His grease paint was black and applied into an aggressive expression. His clothes were dark and dirty, contrastingly different to the usual baggy, colorful clown attire. And I told them that he was just standing there, grinning at me in a sinisterly uncomfortable manner, while releasing some kind of faint, repugnant perfume. Sorrow and fear filled their eyes. They couldn't hide that from me, not even then. Even so, they did their best to act carefree when explaining how they had moved my bedroom to another down the hall, closer to their room, and swapping places with Dad's office. The weirdest part, though, there were bars on the windows. While I was at school, my father had begun putting iron bars on all the windows, giving the home an ever-increasing inner appearance of a jail. I was convinced that what had been happening to me was real, now more than ever. I told my parents about what Billy had told me about Philip. My parents went still and quiet, trying to convince me to just leave the topic alone for the day, to get it off my mind and see how the night went. That was the first night, and as long as I could remember, where I was able to sleep through the entire night. One where I had pleasant dreams instead of traumatic nightmares. I awoke feeling quite rested the following day. I wondered why my mother had not gotten me up for school when I checked the clock and saw that I was going to be late. I had just started learning how to tell time and was able to read digital clocks. Comprehension of analogs eluded me until I was nearly 7. My father had long since gone to work, but my mother informed me a man would be stopping by to speak with me. He wanted to ask me a few questions. I didn't have any idea who it might be, but looking back, a policeman was practically insinuated. Once he had arrived, we all sat in the living room on separate pieces of furniture, my mom included. The cop, in my father's armchair, asked me, while I sat on the couch, a multitude of seemingly routine questions, much like my parents had asked me the day before. And again, the line of questioning entered the realm of my nightly disturbances. Seemingly satisfied with what I had told him, the man left, telling my mother to call him if she had anything else to offer. It seemed to me that the time that the arrival of the policeman coincided with the departure of my night terrors. I never had another incident after that, not one. So now, we've come upon the reason as to why I'm telling you all this, why I'm divulging my recovery, yet pressed with the necessity of deliverance. Well, fast forward about 17 years to present day. I'm full grown and attending college classes while working my way through school as a security guard at the local hospital. Last week, I received a letter in the mail. There was no return address, which instantly made me ponder the possibility of terrorism, but curiosity got the better of me. There was no toxic powder or any other immediate threats to my life. Only a simple note folded over a lock of brown hair, held together by a simple rubber band. The note read, "My name is Philip Larkin. Do you remember me?" It honestly took me a few moments to remember the name, and when I did, all of this bubbled to the surface as well. See, Phil moved away. At least, that's what I was told. I wanted to send him a letter back, but couldn't as there was no return address. I did find the note quite disturbing, though, paired with a lock of hair and all. I decided that the next time I saw my folks, I would ask them if maybe they knew what had happened to Phil. The next time I would see them was over the Thanksgiving holiday. Work and school keep me plenty busy, but returning home for holidays is paramount to me. After dinner, and my dad was halfway through his third whiskey drink, I sat beside him in the living room, just him and I, and brought up the matter at hand. I don't know if it was the time that had passed, the alcohol, or a combination of the two, but Dad finally let me in on what really happened. Philip was murdered. He had been abducted from his home and was missing for nearly a week. Eventually, he was discovered by the local river by two fishermen. His eyes were gouged out, and he had been carved open. My parents hid this from me all this time because that day, while I was at school, my mother had cleaned my room. When she began to clean under my bed, she instantly called my father at work. She had discovered what the police would identify as a human child's liver, and later that week, as Philip's, wrapped in a crude sheet of clear plastic. My father, in shock and confusion, inspected the window yet again, only this time, he checked the lock by attempting to open the window, not just jostling the lock to the engaged position. He found that the inside of the lock itself had been filed down, allowing it to slide open and shut, regardless of the lock's positioning. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I would have asked my mother, but I really don't think she would have told me anyway. She's always been a little overprotective and stubborn. This was last year. I've since spent a vast majority of my time researching into the topic to find out that this happens more often than you'd likely think. There are numerous eyewitness reports of clowns abducting children from the city nearby during that time, coupled with a string of unsolved kidnappings in which children were taken right from their bedroom, from under their parents' noses. I can't help but connect the similarities that underscore the obvious correlations. So please, I'm looking for anyone that knows anything about this. I need to know that I'm not the only one. You can contact me through the author of this story, as I've written this specifically for him to publish, as he's also been provided with an email that I have set up specifically for this purpose. Please, help me get to the truth before it's too late, before the clowns take someone that you truly care for.
This is one of those stories that might leave you questioning. Well, you're not alone. Me too. Though, even if the truth is out there, I'd hate to look for it. I could find it. But if you want more festive fear, stop by again next weekend. And until then, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can catch you all again next Saturday.
Social media can be very unpredictable, especially regarding horror content. If this content gets removed, all new content will be simultaneously presented on various websites provided in the description to this video. Make sure to follow me in other digital spaces so that you never miss out on the terror. Also, if you like this video, make sure to leave a comment and hit the like button. It helps the channel a lot. If you're new to the channel and you enjoy what's here, consider hitting that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you never miss an upload. Writing is a dream of mine, and it's all of you that make that dream come true.